initiative and ask Mulligan and Graves about it directly. The bad news is that they said they're still trying to figure out what exactly caused the animatronics to act up, so they don't have answers for us yet. And they warned to stay far away from any escaped animatronics we see, because there's a high chance they're still dangerous. Apparently they've put together a team to try and track them down, so hopefully it won't be long before the situation is dealt with. The good news is that after a long discussion and a lot of sweet talking, they've given me access to previously restricted information so that I can put together a sort of survival guide for us in the event that we encounter an escaped animatronic. Of course, I'll also be including any other information I get about them, just for the sake of keeping records. So far, I've only been given access to one animatronic file, but they said that they're going to give me more in the coming days. So I'll be updating the directory with new information as I get it. I probably don't really need to explain this one, because most of you should know what the warehouse is. But for the sake of thorough record keeping, I'll give a brief summary. When the Property Recovery Initiative began, we quickly realized we would need a facility to store the animatronics in, as well as run tests on them. And so the warehouse was constructed to be that facility. On the top floor, we would bring in shipments of animatronics and parts as they were recovered from the old buildings in the Bay Area, as well as research and develop new animatronics with said parts. There was also a couple of small storage chambers that we'd sometimes keep the animatronics in when we didn't need them in one of the observation cells. And there was one observation cell where we would keep whatever animatronic was deemed most important to research. Then in the basement was the observation block, where we had something about 30 observation cells that would keep animatronics in when we wanted to run tests on them. Not many employees were allowed down there, me included, so that's pretty much all I know about it. But when the broken night happened, we had to abandon the warehouse entirely and create a new facility, this time with much better security to ensure it doesn't happen again. As I'm sure you'd imagine, animatronics sometimes show up at the warehouse, either because their AI naturally leads them back there, or they're intelligent enough to want revenge. Either way, steer clear of the warehouse if you can help it. As I'm sure many of you know, Fazbear Robotics used to be two separate companies before the merge. One of them was Fazbear Entertainment, who made several restaurants and arcades over the years that featured animatronic mascots that performed on stage to entertain customers. Unfortunately, they always ended up getting shut down, either because of mishaps with the animatronics themselves, or foul play by what most assume was a disgruntled former employee. They've been abandoned ever since, and the only real human activity they've seen in the last couple of decades is when we sent a team in to collect all the old animatronics for the Property Recovery Initiative. However, in the wake of the broken night, a lot of the escaped animatronics have been making their way back to the pizzerias on occasion. I guess it makes sense that their AI would be programmed to go back there. But again, I'm not a software engineer, so I don't really know. The point is, avoid the abandoned pizzerias if you don't want to run into a haywire animatronic. Annoying that they won't just give me an exact location to share with you guys. But one of the spots we've been seeing the animatronics show up frequently is a campsite in the forest on the outskirts of Hurricane. I'm not sure what relevance it has to the animatronics or why they continue to show up there, but they do. As I mentioned in its own record, Springtrap was the first to show up there, and basically lives there at this point. It's possible the other animatronics are going there because of him, but I don't know why that would be the case. It should be pretty easy to identify if you wind up there. There's a bunch of supply crates with old Fazbear Entertainment branding on them. Not sure why. The more of this stuff I write, the more I feel like I don't know a damn thing about the company I'm working for. Was originally recovered from a horror attraction called Fazbear's Frights that was set up without any of the company's knowledge. It was based on the spooky rumors that surrounded the company back in the Fazbear Entertainment days, after the infamous missing children's incident case went cold. Fazbear Frights had a focus on authenticity, with most of the decor being recovered from abandoned Freddy's locations. This of course included the main attraction, which was a real, genuine spring lock suit. The first big advancement Fazbear Entertainment made in animatronic tech way back in the day. Able to double as both an animatronic and a mascot costume. But of course, I'm sure we're all aware of the many unfortunate accidents that those suits caused, which made it perfect for a horror attraction, especially in its decrepit, withered state. They even went the extra mile and locked a fake corpse inside, hence what we've named it, the Springtrap. It's really creepy to look at, and the voice they gave it really sold the vibe. They didn't give me much information about what they did with the Springtrap once we recovered it, but they did say that they updated its AI to our latest model before the incident last week. So it should be just as smart, if not smarter than the others, despite being so outdated hardware-wise. After the Springtrap escaped, it bounced around a few different abandoned Freddy's locations. Judging from the footage they gave me, it seems like it's looking for something. Not sure what. Eventually they managed to track it down to a campsite in the woods on the outskirts of Hurricane, which as far as they can tell is where it spends most of its time. They gave me about an hour or so worth of footage of the Springtrap hunting and killing people. Luckily for my sanity, the cutout or censored most of the aftermath, so it wasn't too bad to look through. Here's what I've gathered. It carries a fire axe with it at all times, which is capable of throwing at long distance accurately. Its strength and speed border on the absurd, or how decrepit it looks. You can easily outpace a human, especially in short bursts, as well as pick them up and throw them with one hand. On top of that, it's smart enough to make traps and set up ambushes. There really doesn't seem to be any kind of exploitable weakness. Lastly, there's a few times where I saw it do something that I assumed was a scream. It's hard to tell because the footage had no audio, but that's what it looked like it was doing. What's weird about it is that every time it does it, all the people around it seem like they can't tell what's going on anymore. They don't even know where they are. Could also just be me going insane after looking behind all this stuff for so long. But I figured I'd include it, just in case. Some advice? Avoid an encounter with the Springtrap entirely. As previously mentioned, it's known to spend most of its time in an old campsite on the outskirts of Hurricane. They didn't give me an exact location, unfortunately, so just try to stay away from wooded areas that border the city, if you can help it. If you do end up running into it, best thing you can do is break line of sight and hide until it loses interest. From the footage I saw, that's what had the best odds of survival, though it's still unlikely it'll work. It's disturbingly good at finding people who try to hide. Also watch the ground. I wasn't being hyperbolic about the traps, that's a legitimate problem. Hopefully this situation will be sorted out soon and we don't have to worry about this thing anymore. Costume Banner was a frequent collaborator with Fazbear Entertainment back in the 70s, usually being their go-to contractor for anything robotics related that they needed built. The partnership ended when MCM went bankrupt, failed to complete an important contract, which illegally allowed Fazbear Entertainment to seize all of their assets. A couple months ago, our recovery team went into MCM as part of the property recovery initiative that Graves put into motion around the time of the merge, and came back with the Mimic, which is a highly advanced animatronic endoskeleton, featuring onboard artificial intelligence, the likes of which could even rival our newest models. The building was abandoned since the 70s, so that's when the Mimic had to have been developed. But the tech is half a century ahead of its time. I wanted more details about what kind of genius developed this, and what their process was. But Graves and Mulligan's either don't have the answers, or they just didn't tell me. After the recovery of the Mimic, we dedicated our main observation chamber to it for a little over a month, trying to figure out what exactly its limitations were, and what it was capable of. Its limitations have still yet to be found, and its capabilities seem to know no bounds. Every time we think we've seen everything, it does something we've never seen before. After the broken night, the Mimic was one of the few animatronics we were able to recontain before it could escape. Unfortunately, it's still extremely volatile, and can't seem to decide if it wants to be complacent or dangerous. So it's highly recommended that anybody with access to the observation block avoid the Mimic cell unless they're directly assigned to it. Seeing as I was one of the researchers that was helping with reverse engineering the Mimic, I'm very well informed about what it can do. The mimic seems to have been designed to be able to, well, mimic anything it sees, both behaviorally and physically. As such, its frame was designed to be adaptable. Most of its joints have 360 degrees of motion and are capable of extending and retracting to mimic different sized characters. It can redirect its power output to specific areas of its frame to enhance specific functions while limiting others. For example, during the Broken Night, it frequently directed the majority of its power to its arms for advanced strength, or to its legs for advanced speed. The mimic is highly intelligent, and can use its voice mimic function to almost perfectly recreate any voice it hears, often for the purpose of tricking people into coming closer. It usually combines this with limiting its power output to shut off its eyes and soften its footsteps, so that it can blend into the darkness and not be easily heard moving as to not give itself away. I'd tell you about how exactly it attacks, but I'm not sure I have a clear answer myself. It's programmed to adapt to different situations and any things it sees, so its arsenal is always evolving. I've seen it use its hand as a drill to try and dig its way out of its cell before. It would have probably worked if we hadn't been quick on the draw with a controlled shock. Nothing is off the table for that thing. Since our new facility has much better security, I doubt the mimic will be escaping anytime soon, so you probably won't have to deal with it at all. That said, in the event that you do, there's some key pieces of knowledge that can shift the odds in your favor. For one thing, the mimic lacks range. Since it adapts so quickly, I can't say that it won't learn to attack from long ranges somehow. But from what I've seen, it currently has no way to attack you if you just keep your distance. Of course, with its strength and speed, that's easier said than done, but it's definitely your best option. It should also be noted to not trust the voice of anyone you can't see when the mimic is around. I know a lot of you probably wouldn't like to admit that you wouldn't be able to tell your friends apart from something that heard their voice for a couple of minutes and then pretended to be them. But you have to understand, the M2 is made with the explicit purpose of being able to mimic every trait of a character or person. So trust me, when I say you aren't somehow a bad friend for not being able to tell the difference. Drop the pride and focus on surviving. Lastly, be prepared for anything. Never think you're 100% safe, because it will find a way to hurt you if given enough time. Ennard was originally recovered from a scrapyard not too far from Hurricane. When interviewed, the owner said it was sold to them by a small group of urban explorers that they frequently do business with. And those explorers said they found it deactivated in an abandoned section of the hurricane sewers a few days after a large flash flood. The story seems to check out, as when Ennard was first brought in, it was clear it had sustained heavy water damage, though we aren't sure how it ended up in the sewers. I can tell just by looking at it that it was made by the former leadership, because I worked there for a few months before the merge. But I definitely don't remember ever seeing an endoskeleton that resembled anything close to what Ennard looks like. While the former leadership did use many thick wires attached to form their endoskeletons, they're always put together in a neat and organized fashion to form a cohesive shape. Ennard, in contrast, is basically just a big tangle of wires in a vaguely humanoid shape. Graves was the CEO of the former leadership before the merge, so if anyone knew where this thing came from, it'd be her. She claims to not know anything either, so I guess it will just have to remain a mystery for now. Once again, they didn't elaborate much about what exactly they did with it after we recovered it. But apparently, whatever they did, shattered its AI into a bunch of separate AIs that now share the same frame rather than being one cohesive entity. I'm not exactly sure how that's possible, but I'm a mechanical engineer, not a software engineer. So what do I know, right? Apparently it's still able to function physically, despite being controlled by multiple AIs at the same time. Which I suppose makes sense, considering they're all just separate parts of a greater whole. Its mental state is where the problems arise. It constantly switches its personality and voice seemingly at random, which makes it incredibly volatile, likely even more so than the mimic. Ennard was one of many animatronics to escape during the Broken Night, and we've been barely able to track it at all, due to reasons I'll get into in the capabilities section. What we do know is that it frequently visits old Fazbear property, which seems to be a common theme. Ennard is capable of manipulating each of its wires individually, and as such is able to extend its limbs by straightening them out. The farthest I've seen it grab someone from in the footage I was given is about 5 meters away, but it's possible it can get even longer than that. It can even manipulate its wires remotely, after taking chunks of wires out of its frame and placing them somewhere. The files I was given refer to these chunks as wire eyes, which is a very literal name. It is in fact made of wires and it does have eyes. I probably would have called them Ennardlings, but that's maybe too cutesy of a name for something that's effectively a sentient bomb. Well, sentient is debatable actually. They just move towards people that they see. They latch onto them and then they explode. It could just be basic movement sensors, but they haven't exactly managed to get a sample to study because, well, you know, they explode. Anyway, under the most horrifying thing I've ever had the displeasure of witnessing. Whenever Ennard kills someone, it can burrow into them and wear their skin like a suit. I'm not kidding. On top of this, it seems to feature the same voice mimicking systems that the Mimic has, so it's able to somewhat convincingly play the role of your closest friends. It doesn't have the Mimic's behavioral analysis system, so it's not a perfect disguise. But if you don't know what's coming, then it might as well be. That's why it's been so difficult for us to track it. It's not hiding. It's just wearing the skin of people and walking around. Anyone could be Ennard, and you wouldn't know until it's too late. My advice? Trust no one.
IEP!
What are you doing?
Come on, let's go. We'll talk up there.
It's a nice day.
He goes,
Remain where you are.
I said,
Get up on the fucking roof.
At all.